find you. And I will kill you.
I am the walrus. Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Just been revoked.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Because it is my name!
I see dead.
Today, Junior?
You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? What?
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
The price is wrong, bitch.
All right. Welcome to another live stream of the Critics Not Cynics podcast. As we get back into the swing of things, since we're taking a couple weeks on and off. As always, I'm joined by Leslie. Leslie, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing quite all right, especially after the kind of jam-packed busy day, so that we can bring this podcast episode to you guys. So if you're not already aware by the title, of course, the title being a little play on the two topics we're discussing. We're going to be talking about The Batman. Leslie and I both got a chance to see it here on opening weekend and figured this was one of the best times to kind of get it out there for everyone right when an opening weekend. We are going to talk spoilers, but just for you people who haven't seen it yet, we are going to talk about spoilers at the very end of this episode. So we're going to do a non-spoiler review, talk about the story, talk about casting, all of that jazz. And then we will talk about our second topic, which is Star Trek Picard Season 2. It premiered this week. And if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, you know we did a very extensive review series a while back when Season 1 aired. This probably won't be as extensive because I have not had a chance to rewatch it nor take my long, dutiful notes.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So that is what is on the docket today. And to get all of the other stupid jazz out of the way, if you want to like this on YouTube, please do share it on your social media platforms. Subscribe to the show. Obviously, we have Patreon. All that stuff's in the links in the description. And if you're listening audio only, we're on Podbean, iTunes, just about any place you can get your audio only podcast. And we do have a little bit of good news because we thought we were going to have to not do the rest of our series that we were doing on Patreon, but thankfully, even though we heard the rumors and we talked about them in the last live stream, the Marvel Netflix shows are moving to Disney Plus. They will be available here, I think, mid-month, or they're already available now. So we will be able to continue our watch-along of Daredevil. So we were really, really worried there for a little bit. And then we also will have a pre-recorded video coming out to continue our MCU franchise review. We are going to be discussing Thor Dark World. I'm not going to say when that's coming out because I have a little bit of a scheduling snafu when we were going to record. But that should be coming out this week at some point. And because what we're going to do is we have these live streams and we're going to have the kind of interspersed with some pre-recorded videos, and we figure MCU franchises are perfect for pre-records, so you can go watch them whenever, watch them along as you're watching the MCU. So we hope you guys enjoy that content as well. There will be a separate playlist on our YouTube page, but they will not have our prior episodes that were audio only when we were audio only podcasts. So you'd have to go out to Podbean or iTunes to go check out those backlogs. So yeah, I think that's enough of the jazz out of the way. So let's just dive right into it.
The Batman.
The Batman. And as I told Pat, our elusive third chair co-host, Matt Reeves does not know how to make a short movie outside of Cloverfield. Cloverfield was, I believe, his first film. And if you would have told me back in, I believe that was like 2006, 2007, when Cloverfield came out, if you would have told me that this man would go on to direct the Planet of the Apes series, the Batman, and that, you know, this dorky little guy was going to kind of helm these grandiose stories and make these fantastic films, I don't know if I would have believed you, even as a fan of Cloverfield. I'm not sure I would have believed that, because it always kind of blows my mind whenever I hear his name brought up on a big project. I'm like, the Cloverfield director? Like, really? And now it's just like he's a household name. The man doesn't know how to make a film almost under 3 hours. If you look at any of the Planet, I think maybe the first Rise of the Planet of the Apes was maybe under 2 hours, but then you get to Dawn and War, they're much, much longer films. And that is to a strength and detriment for him and for his movies, depending on what your opinion is on long films. So that's one thing I've heard a lot of reviewers talking about. We've had a little bit of a discussion about it, not anything super big or intensive or critical. But I will say this, if you are turned off by that runtime, 2 hours and 56 minutes, I believe is the total length. It's going up on HBO Max April 19th. So if you want to wait. Like, it's a good film, but I would say, like, if you can wait a month, you'll be fine. Like, you might get some spoilers here and there, but honestly, there's nothing so, except for within the main story itself, I guess, there's nothing that's so, like, monumental about the film that if you find out plot details, I don't think it ruins the movie for you necessarily.
No, there's one spot of the movie where I would say it's better in the theater with the sound. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you don't have a good sound system, you know, that might be something if you want that theater experience of, like, the whole room shaking.
Right.
But if that's not a thing for you, you don't really care, you got a decent sized TV, whatever, you know, yeah, you could wait and be able to pause and go to the bathroom, because, oh my gosh, yeah, definitely by the time we got to the credits, I was like, okay, is there an end scene? Because I have got to go.
I was, like, even preemptive. I went to the bathroom prior to entering the theater, and we were there about a good 30 minutes before the movie started. And then,
yeah, just to clarify, you and Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah, because for people who don't realize, yeah, we live in different states.
Right. We work for the same company, but in different states. Pat and I, yes, when we went to go see it this morning, we went into the bathroom and then got in our seats, sat there for about another 10, 15 minutes, and then I was like, all right, I'm going one more time. And even still then, like, probably about good 40, 50 minutes into the movie, I'm like, oh man, I need to go, but I'm not going. Because I will say, there are a lot of things that if you got up and went to the bathroom at specific points, and they're so spread out that you can't easily isolate them, you could miss a very important plot detail. Mm-hmm. And this film, much like other Matt Reeves films, is very plot focused, very plot heavy. And I would describe this as a fan of all the other Batman films, even somewhat to an extent the Joel Schumacher ones. This and also actually really enjoying Ben Affleck as Batman in his short term. This is the first comic book Batman movie, and if you don't know what I mean by that, it takes a lot of inspiration and adapts for the most part, faithfully, actual comic storylines. It's a mixture of Long Halloween, Zero Year. There's even a mixture of some of the Arkham video games into it. expanded universe, some Batman 66 Easter eggs in there. This is the first time I have felt in watching a Batman movie that Gotham feels like Gotham. It feels like it's its own thing. And I was explaining this to Pat, and unfortunately he couldn't join us tonight. He had a prior engagement. It doesn't just look like New York or Chicago. Like, yes, it's filmed in both cities, but the way that Gotham is an amalgamation of all the major cities it's based off of, it has its own character. It has its own feeling. It has its own soul. I mean, it's got its own Times Square. It's got its own Madison Square Garden. It's got the bridges from Chicago. Like, all of those amalgamations make it really feel like it's its own city. I don't know if you had a similar opinion to that or not.
So if we're just talking like setting.
Yeah.
I feel like the scouting of locations, like, because I also saw like bits of London in there too, was really well done. It really did feel like a lived-in place, like a lived-in real place. Like, I mean, again, because we've talked about before, like, I wasn't like hardcore into DC or anything like that, so I don't have like a ton of backup knowledge for any of that.
Right.
But it did feel like the setting itself did feel like an actual, like, makes sense lived in place. It wasn't just like, here's some stock photography that looks like the skyline of New York, or things like that. The thing that always confuses me is, in my mind, I'm like, I try to place where these are. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that Gotham was always kind of more like Detroit, but then they're talking about, but I'm saying in my head.
Right.
But then, with the sea, and I'm like, oh, crap, so they're actually on a coast somewhere. And, and in my mind, I'm trying to rearrange the little map that I've made of where I feel like they all belong,
Yeah, Gotham's always intended to be East Coast because, they were largely inspired by New York City. Much, of course, so is Metropolis. So, it's like...
that's the thing. It's like, if they both are there, are they like across the bay from each other?
And,
it's like New Jersey and New York.
That was the really cool thing that Zack Snyder did with Batman v Superman, is he established that. He made it like they're just across the bay from each other. And kind of that like they got that rivalry because they are right next to each other. Whereas in other films that don't really interconnect, you don't really get that established that well.
Right.
Yes, the aesthetics of this film, the setting, the visuals, it is perfect. It's what you would expect from a Matt Reeves film. It's dark. It's dark, but that doesn't define the movie, I would say. Like, even though the way it's shot, the way the film actually portrays out, like, because this will be, you'll hear me say this if you listen to our MCU review on Thor: Dark World. Thor: Dark World is the movie that took its own title too seriously, meaning everything about it is dark. The lighting's dark, all the colors are dark, the story is dark, like everything about it, all the characters are acting dark, like it just takes it too seriously. Whereas, Batman's a brooding character, but this is a dark film, and it's not just all focused on Batman. Like, it is, because I will say the character in of itself is Gotham. Like, Gotham is a character within the film, and not just, it's the city of Gotham, but the history of Gotham. Again, it's just beautifully done, and it feels so entrenched in comics lore that it feels like to be the most real version or real comic book movie of Batman. The score is fantastic. Even the little theme that they came up with for the Batman I loved it every time you would hear it, like, just play in the background. Just beautifully done. And so without, me going any further on that, because I could ramble on for hours about the sets and the aesthetics, what other thoughts do you have on that?
I'm trying to think of non-spoiler things to say, which is the thing is, like, I don't want to spoil anybody for the non-spoiler section. Overall, I I guess if you're coming to this podcast, you probably already have some basis of knowledge of DC or things like that. But like, if you don't, okay, this is not campy, funny Adam West Batman.
No.
If this is not superhero action movie, if that's what you want, this is not for you. This is very dark themes, heavy themes, and it's very much like a cerebral, gritty film noir Batman murder mystery. It's very suspenseful and thriller, which really appeals to me. So this is not like, if you're just looking for your summer blockbuster action hero movie, this is not for you. But for everything else, like, this is amazing. It was really, really good. And I like the realism of it is what I liked, that it kind of really walked that line, because I mean, there's obviously some ridiculous things that you're like, that's not real, obviously, but it had everything feel possible and real, which is one of the things when we had the Chris Nolan Batman movies that I really liked, that it wasn't just completely like, out of left field or whatever. So this actually even feels more real to me than those did. Like his suit, his car, and how Matt Reeves does such a great job of actually, this is, our criticism of Captain Marvel all the time. He shows you everything.
Yeah.
He doesn't just tell you. It's like, people need to study this. Like, use this as a blueprint for your class. This is what we mean when we say we want you to show us things and not tell us. Because you see all the car parts in his Batcave. Never once does anybody just go like, oh, because I've been tinkering on my car. There's not a single line. Not one. You just see it. And then you see him in the car. Like, nobody has to tell you and fill you in that, oh, look, he's working on the Batmobile. Things like that, like how people react to him, and you can see, like, this is clearly the first time he's ever done this, because it's weird that he's here, the way that everybody's looking at him. Nobody says a tossed line that says it.
Right.
So it's a very cerebral movie. You do have to pay attention. If you like thrillers and things like that, like, the characters are more realistic. I believe from the trailer that that Colin Farrell's playing Penguin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a realistic, interesting take on Penguin. Like, to me, it seems like, yes, he's part of the mob, and like this would be like how he would be there, and not just like the wah wah, thing with the fish.
Although they do work the Wadawood very well, right, though, but they work it in.
Right, but it's like he has a gimp, and things like, it's not like, I can't remember his name, but in the Adam West one, his purple top hat,
Burgess Meredith.
Yes, that's it, Burgess Meredith. It's not like that. So, like, the character has kind of like a realistic, like, yes, this is if the mob was in Gotham, and this is how it would be, and how the characters would kind of play out. So nothing feels like totally ridiculous to me.
Yeah, this is one thing, because you bring up a very, very good point that I wanted to, I expressed to Pat as well. I don't want this, though, to stick 100% to like total realism, because like I know people have asked Matt if he would bring Superman into this universe, or a Superman for this Earth, and he's like, I'm a little bit iffy on that, because it breaks outside kind of the realistic world he's created. And I don't want that to be a constraint, because I still think you can have that, and those two characters can still coexist, and he can still be an alien from another world and stuff like that, and keep all of the like ridiculous stuff in Metropolis, while Gotham stays completely kind of ground crime oriented, because I know he's got certain plans for the future that I can't talk about right now without spoiling something. So I caught myself as I was about to say it. But like, I don't want it to become too reliant on that, because it does feel really good. That gritty, you had it perfectly on the head with the crime noir. Like, it is a film noir. It is. Mm-hmm. You have him narrating most of the film for a good period. Which is, if you're a Watchmen fan, really feels like Rorschach, narrating his journal. But like, it does a really good job of, like you said, it's showing. You don't have to know Bruce has gone through some pretty horrific stuff.
Oh yeah, can I just say,
yeah.
just because it popped into my head, thank you, Matt Reeves, for not having a single flashback to Thomas and Martha Wayne's, and her pearls go across the alleyway. Like, finally, a Batman movie where we don't have to just sit through that. Like, jeez.
Right. But you see him early on in the film, and he takes off his shirt or whatever, and you see all the bruises, the scars, everything that shows that he has gone through physical hell for his character. And yes, if you're going in, because I've heard a criticism, and this is actually secondhand knowledge, but again, Critical Drinker, go check his videos out. He's far better at this than we are. He has the subs to show it and the views to show it, but his major criticism of Robert Pattinson is he's a great Batman, not so great Bruce Wayne. But
I have thoughts on that.
Well, and here in the so we'll as we tried to do when we were pre-recording these, we're gonna kind of move to now casting and characters. So this is the perfect time to talk about it. This film has no Bruce Wayne problem. Because
no, it doesn't.
Bruce Wayne isn't the focus of the film.
Yeah, I was about to say, Bruce Wayne is not the focus of this film whatsoever. He's kind of a side character, if that.
He has about 2 major scenes not in the Batsuit.
And I don't know if this is too much of a spoiler, but I particularly like that they went with a recluse instead of Playboy.
That's not really a spoiler.
Okay, so they went more recluse Bruce Wayne because he's so far into Batman and all this that he's dealing with psychologically that, Bruce Wayne is not the playboy and extravagant or whatever. So they went recluse. And I personally feel like this really set up for Bruce Wayne to be a focused character in the next movie.
Right, yes. And see, this was always Matt's intention. This is going back to why this feels like the most accurate comic book movie version of Batman, because it's taking key storylines. And another one I wanted to mention was Batman Earth 1. Really factors into this. If you've read that graphic novel, you'll get some of the characterizations that they do with Penguin or how Penguin looks. And I think Riddler was involved in Volume 2 of that. But this also is taking Year One and kind of being a sequel to Batman Year One from the comics, which was all about, him becoming Batman. We're jumping right in. It's Year Two. He's been Batman for 2 years. He's already got his relationship established with Gordon. No need to rehash that. We got the bat signal. No need to rehash that. He's already the cops are already wary and not accepting of him for the past 2 years. Don't need to rehash that. And what's the biggest complaint we typically have with comic book movies, especially when they're introducing a character for the first time? We got to wait 40, 50 minutes to see them in the suit.
Right.
This wastes no time. First time you see Pattinson, really, he's in the suit. And he is in the suit for about 90% of the film. And as a fan who, yes, I know Bruce Wayne is essential to the character of Batman, I'm coming to a Batman movie to see him as Batman. And the scenes outside of him in the suit are all instrumental to why he's in the suit for most of the time. So now to talk about Robert Pattinson, because I still have a 50-50 opinion of him. And this is primarily, let me clear this out, especially if my guild master from Lost Ark is listening, so she doesn't murder me, because we already had this discussion. This isn't because of Twilight, okay? I've never seen Twilight. I don't intend on seeing Twilight. Twilight is an abomination of the book to movie genre, in my opinion, as well as being a book in of itself. So, and of course, when Goblet of Fire came out, I didn't even know who he was, let alone the fact that he played Cedric Diggory. And so prior to this film, and prior about 6-7 months ago, maybe a year ago, to this film, the only movie I had seen him in was Goblet of Fire. Then The Lighthouse came out with Willem Dafoe, and I watched it because it looked interesting. It didn't really want to watch it for Robert Pattinson, but more for Willem Dafoe. And I was like, actually, pretty talented actor. He held his own against Dafoe and did a really good job in the film. So when it came to the announcement that he was taking over, I'm like, well, he doesn't have the Bruce Wayne look per se. And I don't know how he's going to do. Then the trailer comes out. Trailer looks pretty decent. Looks like he's going to be a good Batman. I kind of like that his Batman voice wasn't too trying. It's not the Christian Bale gravelly, and it's not the voice modulation of Ben Affleck. Right. It's just kind of a variation of how he sounds himself. So, I had those apprehensions, and the book is still out on him being an overly talented actor. He was good in Tenet. I forgot I did see him in Tenet, and he was really good in Tenet. But if you are worried about him in this film, if you personally are worried about Robert Pattinson playing Batman, don't worry about it. I think he does a fantastic job. And again, the criticism about being Bruce is not a factor in this film. Bruce Wayne is almost a non-entity. And I will say part of why he doesn't look like a good Bruce is his hair. It's too long. But as you were saying, the recluse thing, it makes sense that now that's not who he is. And moving forward, learning that I think Selina is a reason why Bruce needs to come out of that show. Like, he comes to that realization throughout the film with his relationship with her that there is something more than just Batman. Like, he can't just all be there. So we might see more of an actual proper Bruce if they make... and I know he's got kind of a sequel moving around in that head of his, so who knows what Matt's going to come up with. But I think you'll see a more proper-looking Bruce in a sequel than you will in this one. But yes, I was very impressed with his performance.
Yeah, I think he did a really good job. I mean, when they announced the casting, I just didn't have any feelings one way or the other, honestly. Just because, I knew his name, and I have also never seen Twilight or any of the books or anything, but I knew his name because of, culture.
Right.
And that he was the guy, the vampire in Twilight. That's pretty much what I knew. I don't know if I've seen him in anything else. I'd have to actually go and look. But I didn't have any reaction. I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. And I watched the movie and he was great. I didn't have any issues with how he looked as Bruce because it all made sense. He's the recluse. He doesn't look healthy. That's kind of the point. He's not out there as the playboy or anything yet, and the company's dying basically because he's still in the midst of all his dealing with his psychological issues and grief and things, and it's he's not supposed to be all slicked up and Bachelor of the Year or anything. That's not who he is right now.
That's what Alfred's trying to get him to be, essentially. He's so caught up in his grief. I do want to point this out because I know people have kind of made fun of it from the trailers and stuff because you don't know kind of the context, and if you're not really reading up on any articles talking about it. I have to appreciate and give Matt Reeves a lot of credit on this because this is always a detail that always kind of bothered me with any of the previous other Batman movies. When he's got the cowl on, you got, eyeliner or whatever, makeup there, the black around the eyes.
Oh, yeah.
But when every actor would take off the cowl, their eyes are fine. They're clear.
Yeah.
And here, you see it. It's still on his
face. He clearly has, and I think he did in charcoal across his whole face here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tiny detail like that because someone's not just going to take off a cowl and there just happened to be some type of prosthetic or, something that would attach to their eyes. So that's another, again, small detail that I really appreciate. So, yes, if Pattinson is a turnoff for you in this film, please try to put whatever apprehensions or criticisms, because from my understanding, he doesn't even like the Twilight films. Like, he's not really proud of that. And he was a lot younger then. You know, same with Kristen Stewart. Kristen Stewart has gone on to do plenty of other very impressive films. She, I think, has had a better time escaping from that legacy than Robert has. But I think that this is the start. I think that putting him into the mainstream audience with a film like this is going to do a better job for his career and being taken more seriously in other projects he's working in. And of course, it's a Matt Reeves film, so you can't not have Andy Serkis in the film. If you were not familiar, he was Caesar in the Planet of the Apes films, and I love Andy. I mean,
he does a great job.
He's fantastic. He's very reminiscent of the Gotham Alfred. Oh God, why am I? Oh God, I'm missing his name, and I love him. It's Sean. His father was the Third Doctor. Oh God, why can't I think of his last name? Oh God, this is going to bother me. Anyways, he's very reminiscent of him, because it is very much more of a, I was in the military. You know, I'm more, even though I'm proper and stuff like that.
I'm tough.
Pertwee. That's why I couldn't remember it. I don't know why. I knew it started with a P, but Sean Pertwee. He's very reminiscent of Sean Pertwee's from Gotham. And I'll even say that this takes a little inspiration from Gotham, the show, especially since they're going to be doing their prequel show focusing on Penguin, which was kind of the whole point of Gotham, the show. So, you know, it's like, I believe stars from the show kind of tweeted at Matt Reeves going, you know, the whole, here, you can copy my homework, just change it up a little bit different, you know, type of thing. So, so they won't notice. But, you know, Andy does a really good job. And sadly, I wish he was in the movie more. He's got about 3 scenes that are very pertinent. But ultimately, like, they don't utilize him enough, but he is trying to be there as the father figure, as the guy who's trying to get Bruce back into the world. But Bruce, of course, is on his holy mission. We have Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, who, and I love Jeffrey. I think he's a fantastic actor about anything I see him in. His Felix Leiter is my favorite with the most recent Bond series. But the problem with Gordon in this film is he's just there. Like, he's just there. I really feel like they didn't utilize his character enough, and he's more just kind of, for lack of a better term, to be the Robin to Batman, essentially. I mean, he's there as kind of backup. He's there as the kind of, you know, the friend on the force. They work the cases together, but it just, he kind of feels more of a background character in this film. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
He doesn't have a ton of agency, but again, it's like, it doesn't really take away for me.
Oh, not a
lot.
Like,
I liked his performance, and I like him as Gordon. I don't know. He doesn't really, I'm trying to think. I'm like, you know, like, I like, there's a couple of scenes specifically, but I don't want to do spoilers and, like, completely name out, like, exact scenes, but I feel like he does a good enough job for what he needs to be, his character needs to be for this kind of movie, like, for Batman, like you said, like, year 2, and just kind of putting us in there in media res. Like, he's exactly who he needs to be. Like, he doesn't need to be, like, so involved because I feel like this is, like we said, this is the beginning.
Right.
Where I feel like he would be kind of maybe a little more involved and have a little more agency and kind of, like, skill building as we go on. Because then, we've been doing this for, like, 5 years, and, like, and I kind of really know by now, like, the first 2 years of their relationship is, like, building this trust, you know, between them. And, of course, he's still an officer. He's not commissioner at this point. Right. He's still just a regular guy on the force. So he hasn't, like, built up to that position yet, you know.
I will say though, the scene in the interrogation room.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one.
Is not to, because it's such a good scene, so I don't want to spoil anything. But it is a good interplay, and it is a good example of that relationship and that trust, and it's very very well done. We're sitting there and just like, oh, that's fantastic. I absolutely love how that scene plays out. And then we have Zoe Kravitz as Selena Kyle. Fantastic. I mean, like that's. Sadly, you're going to hear that about every person that's in this film is they were fantastic.
They did a great job.
Actor, actress, even the extras, like everyone does a really good job. The woman who plays Bella Real, she's fantastic. Even the mayor at the very beginning, even though he's got like 2 minutes of a scene,
right.
It's very believable. It's just. Everyone brought their A game, and I know that that's part of Matt Reeves being a part of this, as he knows how to bring those performances out, or he knows what to do. He's kind of becoming a Stanley Kubrick, in the sense of, I saw something prior to going live. They did one scene 200 times.
Oh man!
To get the perfect take, and that just reminds me of the steps scene in The Shining, which was like 237 takes or something like that. And again, like, so getting back to Zoe does a really good Selena Kyle. It's actually far better than Anne Hathaway. It's far more believable.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, it's so much more. She is so much more believable in her Selena Kyle story in this movie than Anne Hathaway in that movie, by far.
And part of the difference between Dark Knight Rises and this is you get her background. She talks about her mother. She talks about the club. And like that's what I'm saying. There are very exposition heavy scenes that, if you got to get up and run to the bathroom, you might miss pertinent details like that. You might miss certain relationships that she has that are impacting certain scenes later on in the film. And her choreography, like just her fighting with him in the very first time they meet, is just very well done. Because it's not even like he can overpower her. It's just they match each other hit for hit for hit.
Right, and I also think that her fighting style makes sense for somebody who's, like, obviously Zoe Kravitz is very tiny. She's very, very slim. She's not like a beefy girl, okay? She looks like she's maybe a 00. But her fighting style, like, makes more sense that it focuses a little more on the heavy kicks with the legs and things, than, like, I'm Captain Marvel and I'm very tiny Brie Larson and I punch something with my spaghetti arm stick, like stick arm, and this whole thing explodes. And I'm just like, for me, that does not pass the suspension of disbelief. Like, I don't believe it whatsoever. Like, so her fighting style being a little more like heavy on like, let's flip over and kick and like focus on that sort of thing, just makes it more believable, at least for me.
It's speed versus brute force, and
right. And she has to be a little more.
And that's the difference between the the modern Soulsborne video game player, as I'm experiencing playing Elden Ring, where I'm going in purely for a strength based character to do the most damage, whereas most people go for the more speedy characters to do shorter damage over time, but can move around quicker and get around the big heavy hits. So, and that again, like you said, it makes very much sense for that being her fighting style. Bruce is being more kind of brute force, especially later on in the film near the climax, with bashing the guy's face in. But it matches up really well, and I think that this does a really good job establishing that relationship. Which, of course, again, this also reminds me of another thing it's taking its inspiration from, the Telltale's Batman video game. If you played that game, there are literal shots from this movie that are taken from that video game, and also some little plot lines that are taken and put in there. So, like, again, it's all these little things that all culminate into this movie that make it really good for me and make me really enjoy the flick. We have John Turturro as Carmine Falcone. And and I'll tell you Pat's thoughts on that was he was really happy to see John Turturro finally play like a serious character after so long because he's mostly in comedies. His Carmine was terrifying. I mean, like, and he's not even in the film a whole lot either because of he's also kind of a recluse. He's constantly worried about being taken out by a hitman. So
the other competition.
And the only time he actually comes out is for the funeral scene for like the first time. It's the first time in the film we actually really see him. And then it kind of gets bigger and bigger as the mystery unfolds. And he is absolutely terrifying as Carmine. You never see him without the glasses. He's always got the glasses on. It's one thing, and it's just, again, it's just really well done, a really strong performance. So that really kind of leaves the villain, the Riddler, played by Paul Dano, and he ain't Jim Carrey. Just to ward you offhand.
If that's what you were expecting,
you ain't getting it.
Yeah, no.
He's brutal. He is sadistic. Let's play it out this way. It is the Riddler meets Jigsaw from Saw. And I know you. I don't know. You wouldn't necessarily.
I was just thinking that while I was watching him in that movie, I was thinking it's reminding me a lot of Paul Bettany's performance as Bundy. Or no, not as Bundy. Dang it, what is it? The Unabomber. Can't remember his name. I'm getting them all confused. But he played the Unabomber.
Okay.
And I watched that a few months ago, and it was just like really reminding me of that performance because, and I'm like I can't remember the Unabomber's name right now.
Is that Ted
Kaczynski? Yeah. That he's a really very super intelligent person, and Ted Kaczynski was a very intelligent person, and he went to college at like 14 or 15, something like way too young, away from his parents and anybody to like protect him when he went through this. I forget what it was like the CIA or something. And they were doing psychological tests and things on them. It really, really messed him up. Just as one part of what makes a serial killer.
Right.
But I was just getting a lot of that reminiscent of like, he's really reminding me of Paul Bettany's performance from that. So that's what I was thinking.
Well, I'm talking purely just character aesthetics, like with the traps and stuff like that. Like it really fits if you've seen this, and I know you haven't because you're not a big horror fan, but if you've seen the Saw franchise, like it's very much like, do you want to play a game? And here's a trap that you're ultimately going to lose your life to. But I'm gonna make an observation, and this isn't like, of course, I'm not trying to disparage on anybody when I say this, but this is kind of the idea I got from based off his performance, and it's not, and I don't know if this was what Paul was going for or not, but I liked it. Like, let me be clear about that. What I'm about to say, if it's taken disparagingly, I don't really mean it that way because I actually enjoyed it. I got vibes from the performance that he is autistic in some aspect. That he, and not like full Down syndrome or anything like that, definitely on spectrum, because you can have very highly intelligent people who are on the spectrum, but certain mannerisms he has, primarily near the end of the film, and he's kind of doing this high-pitched whine. And kind of this, because I think it's a sign of his mind. He talks about like, my strength is all up here, but yet like I don't know. I don't know if you got that vibe or kind of that feeling, but it was really certainly something that if it was well done, because like it just felt like this was someone who was trying to do something right, but not having a concept of how to do it right. He did it by doing bad things. But in his mind, in his warped perspective of the world and of reality and of his upbringing, this was the way to do it. And so, again, that might be reading too much into his performance. But
yeah, I don't know.
If it was very well done, and applaud him, because again, this is taking a ridiculous character. Let me while we're talking about this, I will see if I can go ahead and pull up a picture. If people aren't quite familiar of what the Riddler typically looks like in the comic books, well, here we go. We can pull this one up. Of course, this will be a reminder. Let's see, make sure this is all working over here. That's a reminder of what we got in the 90s. Okay.
You can find the 60s Riddler too, with the underwear.
So
over the front.
So we get yes, I'm trying to see if I can find that. But like we're getting you got that. You get kind of here. This is not as great, but
yeah, that looks like a drawn picture.
Yeah, this is more of an artistic rendering, but Frank Gorshin's Riddler, you know, from the 60s. You know, so he's not really a very serious character, and I do think like the show Gotham, to kind of bring that up again, was pretty good at giving us a little bit of a different Riddler. Here's more from the kind of animated series. So, you know, not a character,
like the bowler hat.
Yeah, not a character that is really meant to be taken seriously. And yet here, let's see if I can go ahead and pull up a picture of him in this. This is what you're getting now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's something completely different. It is definitely the serial killer, the kind of the gimp mask, the wrap around the head. Definitely, of course, what no one talks about in the film is this whole design, this whole costume is designed to leave no evidence. I mean, it's like almost outside of, you can see some of his wrist, but like he's almost hermetically sealed, so that this would not, you know, give any hint of his identity or clue. But the diner scene, albeit very short, very well done. I was sitting there thinking, what are we watching, Reacher? When he's like, I ordered pumpkin pie. I ordered
pie.
You know, and then the confession scene between him and Batman, it actually almost beats The Dark Knight in the similar circumstance when he's interrogating the Joker. This was far more insidious. There was also some moments where they, without spoiling it, kind of pull the wool over your eyes, and then you're like, oh wait, what? You know? Mm-hmm. And then you get the kind of what is the setup for the whole final act of the film. So this is doing a good job with its characters and with telling an interesting story, and while also keeping it in that sense of grounded realism.
Yeah, and I think they picked the right, because as I know, Batman has a huge vault of villains, but I feel like for wanting to start this side continuity, whatever, Batman, they picked the right character to do as a serial killer type, you know, which is a really good choice, because, you know, your hero is only as good as the villain in a story. Like, if you can have the best written hero, but if they have nothing to do, you know, the plot, if they're not really fighting anybody interesting, then it's not that good. Right. So I think they made a really good choice, especially knowing that they kind of wanted to go more the film noir detective, you know, really focusing more in on that than all the fancy gadgets and things like that. That he's a really good choice to be like, oh, the Riddler, and that kind of reminds you of, like, you know, like people sending ciphers like Zodiac and things like that. Like, he's the right exact choice to have as the villain for this movie.
You know, you mentioned a key word in there that I saw that some people didn't like about this film, and that's detective. This is the first time, because he is the world's greatest detective.
Detective.
Like, you know, he was a fan of Sherlock Holmes as a kid and all that stuff. Like, And in the comics, we constantly see him be a detective. But we really... He's
constantly, like, investigating and getting into stuff.
And the closest we got to him as a detective in the Nolan series was breaking down the bullets in The Dark Knight. Other than that, he was just an action hero. And Ben Affleck's was a little bit more detective-y, but not so much. And then, of course, Michael Keaton's was more of a detective as well, but not even to the extent that this film, it shows him going through the whole process. It shows him also screwing up, which is all, again, something Captain Marvel could never do. It shows his own character flaws, especially being a year 2 story and showing he's still a rookie. And I'm thinking particularly of the gliding scene, which made me hurt so much. But it's good at showing he's not adept at this yet. He's still learning. And that's what just makes this a good, even though it's an origin story. So let's go ahead, because we'll probably spend about the second hour on talking about Picard. Let's go ahead and kind of wrap up our non-spoiler review of this. Story-wise, it's a mystery. Like, I don't want to go too in-depth
mystery
on it.
Thriller.
Yeah, it is a mystery thriller. Actually, even with the beginning, I was getting kind of horror movie vibes.
I heard that he wanted to go for some horror vibes. I'm like, I could feel them, but there's nothing in there. If that scares you, there's nothing in there that's horror.
It doesn't overwhelm. Like, it doesn't. It doesn't lean too much into it. As particularly in that beginning scene.
Well, you're supposed to be creeped out in the scenes where you have it. Like, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and particularly the scenes of when he's talking about the bat signal in fear. And you have each of these criminals all kind of staring into this dark space, wondering, is he there?
Is he there? Yeah.
And so, like, that's the real kind of, like, extent of horror that's really in this. And, it's definitely not something, if you're not a horror person, you won't get turned off on it because it doesn't overtly rely on it. It's very much crime, film noir. Again, people calling it boring because it's telling this crime story. Or let's kind of get this out of the way too. It's not political. I don't care what anyone tells you about this film. And
if you bring your politics with you, you can find a way to make it political, but there's nothing political in there.
And for example, the Daily Wire, because I can say them because I know we're nothing to them, so they wouldn't care. Daily Wire wrote, Ben Shapiro had his own personal view, and then some writer wrote an actual review, and both of them were so wrong, so off on the mark. And I get it, reviews are subjective, and yes, if you bring some personal bias into the movie prior, it's going to be a problem. Like it just is. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But it's not political. It's much like this is the example I gave to Pat in the car on the ride home. It's how Captain America Winter Soldier is fine being a political film because it's a political thriller. It's while being a superhero movie. This is a crime film noir film while being a superhero movie. So anything that's in there about mass corruption or anything like that, it's part of the crime story. It's part of the mystery.
And it's very par for the course for Gotham Batman.
Yes. Anything, and well, okay. Here's the one line that seemed to really set them off. There's an exchange between Selena and Batman, where she talks about white privileged people, not white privilege, but white privileged. But that's not atypical for the character of Catwoman, because much like Black Cat in the Marvel Universe, she targets wealthy people to steal from. Those typically are people of privilege. That is what the line means. It's not talking about your skin color necessarily. It just so happens that the people in power in Gotham are white and they're privileged. It's all about the power structure that's there, and she wants to steal from them. That's it. That's all the line is about. And it's one line out of a 2-hour and 56-minute film.
Right.
And it literally didn't feel forced, didn't feel out of place. didn't feel like it was trying to push any type of narrative, and the film doesn't. You know, and my final thing on that is, I don't know how you're bored in this movie. I mean, there are moments where, yeah, you could have trimmed it down. I think the last 30 minutes could have ultimately probably been cut from the film, but it's setting up a story arc if they're going to do it in the sequel.
I really think the only way you're bored in this movie is if you went in with expectations of superhero action hero movie, kind of like the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah.
If you went in with those expectations, I could understand if this not really your genre, like film noir, gritty mystery, you would be kind of bored because this is not what this Batman movie is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not Marvel formula superhero blockbuster, explosions that you watch to like, we're going to have some fun at the theater, and eat some popcorn or whatever. That's not this.
And quite frankly, and this is the thing that I wish DC would lean more into, because it's what set them out set them apart from the Marvel movies. The more serious, the more gritty they are. Like that is the DC formula, and that's what Warner Brothers has not understood. Is that okay? You're not necessarily winning the Marvel fans, but you're winning the DC fans by them being serious movies. Because this movie has 0 jokes, but there are laughable moments in there.
Right, I was gonna say there's a couple times.
Like I mean. Penguin being probably the most comedic of the characters in the film. And by the way, kudos, we didn't even talk about him. Colin Farrell, fantastic. Like, steals the show as Penguin in this movie. I'm really interested to see how his prequel show is going to be on HBO Max when that gets done. But there are comedic moments. They know how to set up the moments without being the tongue-in-cheek joke of the MCU, which is something I always felt like set the DC movies apart from the Marvel movies. And as someone who likes both universes, I like my DC being dark and gritty, and I like my Marvel being a little bit lighthearted. I don't want them necessarily to try to go into each other's lanes, which, again, going back to Thor Dark World, Man of Steel came out prior to it, and everyone kind of liked the darker Man of Steel a little bit, so they're like, all right, let's go a little bit darker with our character. And it was like, yeah, it didn't work because it doesn't fit. So to go ahead and give my score, so you don't have to stick around for the spoilers part at the end of the show, 4, I think, 4 out of 5. Fanboy in me wants to go with a straight 5, but there are some issues, I wouldn't necessarily say with pacing, but it is a little overlong, that you could have trimmed up a couple things and streamlined it just a tad bit more. But again, you're going into a Matt Reeves film, and Matt Reeves does not make short movies. So that's my score on it. What about you?
I would probably go ahead and give it a 4.5.
Okay.
Like, I don't know that I'd want to give it a straight 5 just I didn't feel that. But for exactly what it is, a dark, gritty crime noir, film noir, detective story focusing on Batman actually, like, being year 2 and actually, like, doing some detecting without focusing so much on all the side stuff. Like, we're just used to him already being Bruce Wayne, Playboy, and things like that. Like, there's like no fat on this movie whatsoever.
Right.
And I was just re-looking up what the rating was because I couldn't remember. It's PG-13. So unless you know that your younger teenagers can really handle the heavy themes, it's really not for them.
No, it's not for kids at all. Again, another reason why I like the DC a little bit more is they're not trying to necessarily cater to a kid audience.
Right. And I just think, I'm trying to think of just like straight up normies and things like that. And you're like, oh, it's a Batman movie. Sure, I'll go send my kids or whatever. And then this is not at all what you expected to get. Like, I don't know. This is not just like, let's go watch a superhero movie with my 12-year-old or anything like that. I'm just kind of surprised it was PG-13, but I guess there wasn't anything graphic enough to push it to make it an R-rated film.
It was kind of rumored prior to releasing that it might get an R rating, but I guess he must have toned it down a little bit. And again, that's something that we've seen Marvel do it a little bit successfully, and we've seen DC do it a little bit successfully. An R rating doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be just super over the top unless you're Deadpool.
Right. Like, well, I'm just thinking this could probably, and the people might think I'm stupid, but this probably could have gotten an R rating just for the heavy themes.
Yeah.
Like, you need to be at least 17, 18 years old to be able to really be able to watch this and handle those themes and the heaviness of, like, dealing with the grief and all that thing, and not be influenced by it, with your forming little 12-year-old, 13-year-old mind.
Even just with the Riddler's crimes, what he's doing to his victims. Like,
that's heavy and scary. Yeah. So, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be gratuitous violence or gratuitous sex or things like that, just for the theming to be heavy and deep. Like, but I mean, for what it is, 4.5, I thought it was really good. And do you want me to tell the theater story?
Oh, yeah, you might as well, because so she got to see this before I did, and text me, was that last night or was that this morning that you might be of the minority opinion? Was that this morning?
Oh, that was this morning, because I knew you were seeing it today, and I was like, I'm scared that I'm in the minority opinion here, because I went and saw it yesterday, like during the day.
Yeah.
So, because I was trying to avoid an overly packed house. And again, it wasn't like super packed. I'm sure it was that night, because it was Friday night. But in the morning, it was probably like, I don't know, half full, let's say. So we were all sort of spread out and not like on top of each other. But no, the movie ends, and I'm telling you, the second that it turned to like credits are starting to go, the group behind me started laying into this movie. This was the worst movie I've ever seen. This is trash. That's not Batman. Somebody's getting fired. And I mean, they were just going to town. And I was like, oh, I liked it.
I know.
Sinking down into my seat, like turtling into my seat, like, oh dear.
You scared me, because like you sent that and I'm like,
well, I was afraid, because I'm like, oh no, does that mean that like I like this and everybody else is going to hate it for some reason? I was thinking, I didn't know if you would hate it because you have the more of the comic background to like back things up for DC than I do. So I'm like, I'm more towards the normie side when it comes to DC. And I'm like, is there something in here that I just like totally missed and didn't realize? Or,
you bring up that interesting point, because I would have to say that those people that were complaining about it, saying it isn't Batman, they're the normies. Because they clearly have not read or watched like the animated movies or read the comic books, played the video games. Because I've listed off, 10 different examples of what they took storylines from and melded in. And you got Easter eggs for the 66 show. I mean, you got the statue head. And even his mask is reminiscent of Adam West with the stitching and stuff.
Yeah.
But it is an amalgamation of Long Halloween, Year Zero, Year One. It is all of these kind of different stories compiled into one coherent storyline. Batman Earth One, the Arkham games. Again, there's all of these different things that really kind of come into play. And this is also one other thing I wanted to bring up too before I forget it. But I would guarantee that the people that were saying that are people who only have watched the movies, only know or appreciate Ben Affleck's Batman, which is funny because I remember when Ben Affleck was casted and we all hated the fact that he got casted for it. And then he comes out and they're like, actually, he's really good as Batman. Same thing here with Robert Pattinson. Wasn't too thrilled by his casting, was pleasantly surprised by his performance. So I would say, if you're familiar with the comics, you're going to understand this or appreciate this a lot more than someone who hasn't and might take that perspective on it.
I think if they came just with this perspective, I just feel like people do superhero movie and they come with a certain expectation, and that's not what this movie is.
Exactly, because this is one costume aesthetic. I'm not a huge fan of the suit look. I've never been a big fan of the body armor look for Batman. Costume-wise, Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck's Batman suits are the best looking suits in my opinion. But what I do like about this, and I kind of wish there would have been some exposition about this, his bat symbol. Well, of course, it's detachable, but if you notice, the centerpieces look like handles, and and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, Matt Reeves explained about that design that that is the pistol or the gun that killed Thomas and Martha, and it's there as the constant reminder of why he's doing this. So that's again another thing like that Matt adds to the character that I think elevates it amongst some of the other films. So, okay, we've talked about that. Spoiler stuff is for the end, so if you came here just to listen to us talk about Batman, get out of here if you don't want to listen to us talk about Picard, because, of course, we really haven't talked about it that much. I told you I thought it was a good start to the season, and I think you told me something. I know that much.
About Picard?
Yeah, but we both didn't really go into kind of details about what we thought about the episode.
No, I didn't get to watch it the second time like I normally did. Like when we did Picard season 1, I usually got to watch it at least twice.
Yeah,
I didn't have that chance.
So we're doing this off the cuff this time. So let's get this out of the way, because I think you and I, as far as the sphere of people I've heard talk about the show, so I know we're not the only ones out there, but from the sphere of people I've heard talk about the show, those people hate Picard. They thought, as they hated Picard season 1, they thought it was counterintuitive to the character, that it destroyed his legacy, that it emasculated him, that they were just doing a whole big shit on Patrick Stewart and on Star Trek. You and I disagreed. We really liked it. We pointed out flaws. We did have certain issues with certain story points and character motivations, but for the most part, we really enjoyed that journey. Mm-hmm. We also didn't know we'd be getting at least 3 seasons of Picard as well, because kind of thought it was going to be a one-off, especially with Patrick Stewart being as old as he is. And yes, I hope he lives forever, but I won't live in that fantasy world forever. I can't imagine this being a 7-year running show or something like that. Like I
feel like 3 kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think a 3rd season, and they got to film it like now. Like, get it filmed, get it out of the way, just in case, because we saw what happened with like Carrie Fisher and everything. Get it done now. End on a high note. In this little trilogy of seasons, and I think that's all we need. That's all we need from a Picard show. So we really enjoyed it. I kind of, because it's been a while. It's been over 2 years actually, since we've revisited this. So I had a little bit of difficulty remembering certain characters' names, not necessarily the plot, because we got kind of positronic body Picard. We got Soji as well in wherever she's at. We got Agnes. Like I could remember Rafi's name, but for some reason I couldn't remember Rio's name for the longest time of watching it. And we got 7 of 9, and I always want to call him Elrond, but it's Elnor.
Elnor.
But I'm always wanting to call him that, because it just, he kind of looks like Elrond.
He does, yeah.
That's Lord of the Rings Amazon show. That's who you cast as a young Elrond, not whoever you casted for the show. But anyways, we pretty much liked it, I think, to the chagrin of other people who wanted the show to fail because of Discovery not being the best re-entry into the Star Trek universe, which I haven't watched the most latest season, but season 3 was kind of fixing some things while also creating some new problems. So I don't think Discovery's ever going to get it right. I had checked out a little bit of Prodigy, and I liked what I had seen. I love that even though it's animated, they still got Kate Mulgrew back to do an AI hologram of Janeway, and so they can still make her look like Janeway from Voyager, even though, she's up there now. She's not a spring chicken like she was in the 90s and the early 2000s. So I think that they're trying to get to a right place with Star Trek. I think they're trying to correct, and Picard was the first step in that. And I feel like season 2 of Picard, while I have some concerns, from what we see with the trailer of what the season's going to be about. Episode 1 was a great start. In general.
It was a nice opener.
And if you're familiar with our Picard reviews, we usually go beat by beat, but since we're doing this again off the cuff, it's not going to be completely correct. But to give the premise of the episode, Starfleet must once again call on legendary Jean-Luc Picard after members of his former crew, Cristobal Rios, Seven of Nine, Rafi, Dr. Agnes Girardi, discover an anomaly in space that threatens the galaxy. What I really appreciate about this episode is, also the episode's title is Stargazer. And the fact that they kept kind of this, outside of updating it, they kept the original design of the Stargazer that Picard first commanded. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not cathartic, but, or maybe it is cathartic. Just the fact, like, when you see Picard go back on the Stargazer and kind of reminiscing about his first command, and it was just really nice to see that. But yes, it opens up in media res. We got something really bad happening on the Stargazer. This was like what I told you. I tried to start it right while I was working on. It would have been Thursday morning, because it premieres on Thursdays and it's on Paramount, so I don't have to wait till it to go up on Paramount. I turned it on, and within the first minute, I was like, nope, I've got to be sitting down watching this, because you got the red alert flashing, you got people running. Okay, something's going down. I need to be paying attention to this. And we see something, obviously, big spoiler, but Borg, obviously, because what else is going to be attacking computers in this form and fashion and taking over the ship? And then Picard announcing the self-destruct sequence, and we're back at the beginning of the story. This will be interesting to hear from you.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about the Laris Picard thing.
I feel like I need them to explain what happened with Beverly.
Yes.
Because, I mean,
our canon or head canon here.
Right. Like, I'm trying to remember in order. I'm like, I know that, was it the end of season 7 and we go in the future and they were married and then divorced? And I can't remember how we ended it with the movies just right off the top of my head, which is why I normally watch twice and research things.
It did not end with them necessarily in a relationship. I know the beginning of Insurrection starts with Nemesis, sorry. With the marriage of Riker and Troy. So,
Troy, yeah. So
we never got that marriage in there.
The thing that I need to happen before I see Jean-Luc moving on with somebody else is what happened between him and Beverly.
Yes.
Because it doesn't bother me that he gets another love interest or whatever, and she's a widow now, I guess, because her husband died that we saw in season 1.
Right.
None of that really bothers me. It's just that you didn't give me anything about what happened with Beverly, and she's very much been his very constant, he's in love with her, they have something going on.
It's always been the will they, won't they.
Yeah. And I need an explanation for that, for in-universe, because of wherever we left it, versus the season 7, when Q took him to the future, and what happened there. I need an explanation for what actually happened to this point.
Yeah.
Before we're okay, yeah, now he's in love with Laris. He can be in love with her. I don't care. But you didn't give me any... I just needed something.
Yeah, because we have no idea if even Beverly is still alive.
Right. Did she just pass away and he never got the chance and he's sad about it?
Which would make more sense, because that was the one person who he really kind of let himself get more attached to.
And I feel like they missed the opportunity to do that when he goes and sees Guinan.
Yes.
That would have been the place for Guinan to say something about Beverly or whatever, and they could have talked about it there. That would have been the place to give that to me.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that.
Right. Yeah. It was one of those things where it's like you had plenty of opportunity, and again, like I don't feel like I don't have necessarily an issue with them having a relationship, but it doesn't feel fully earned because we haven't spent enough time with Picard and Laris on their own to even see that he might have developed feelings. Like you can make the argument, well, they lived on the the winery forever or whatever, and or the chateau.
Yeah, but
rather.
she was married.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
To like
it's just not, because again we got a gap of time, right? So I would assume that.
I'm assuming like 2 or 3 years because Elnor's a cadet.
Right. So I would say probably since it's been 2 years in real time, I would assume 2 years have passed in show
At
time.
least. Yeah.
Because heck, one thing I didn't mention is Rios is the captain of the Stargazer. And by God, I'm surprised Starfleet allows him to get away with a cigar. But I love it. Let's be clear. I love it. I absolutely love it. It is
Captain's
so
privilege,
and it's characteristic for his character. Like that's what we saw him on the La Serena, and that was even something too. It was really I really enjoyed was like Seven's reintroduction, and she's been using the ship, and she merged all the AIs into one. And it's. I don't know. I really like that.
I don't know if I like that she merged them all because that was fun to see him in different.
It was probably a logistics reason.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I thought it was a very fun interplay. Like they really play off really well with each other. And then I didn't quite get what Girardi's station is on the Stargazer. Like.
Well, I think she's just chaperoning Soji as she goes around and like is a diplomat for synthetic life forms. She's kind of chaperoning her. Okay.
I mean, it would make sense, but I kind of figured maybe like chief scientist or something.
Well, no, because they asked her to come on board to take a look.
Oh, that's right.
When she wasn't part of it. She was with Soji wherever. Oh, they were on the Deltan planet.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
they were on the Deltan.
Which okay, so let me see how stupid are Starfleet and even Dr. Girardi to not catch. So they obviously we've got this Terran space that kind of opens up as we're talking about. We're jumping all over the place, but there's a Terran space that opens up. Tachyons involved and all that stuff. They get a message that's coming through. It's coming in as a screech. They realize it's multiple languages, not one language, and they're all saying the same
layered.
Thing. Right.
Yeah.
How'd they not know that was the Borg? I mean, this is part of the writing that I feel like they just wanted to they wanted to rush it a little bit, be like, let's introduce the threat, let's get it over, we need to get Picard on the ship, so let's create.
I'm wondering if it's just been long enough that. Because we pretty much left the Borg how Kate Mulgrew left them, Voyager, I'm thinking. Like when
we still had the relic and everything that they researched that they had the researchers on with Hugh in season 1 of Picard. So I mean I get what you're saying. It's been a time, it's been a gap, and not all
we've
these
had
people,
that attack.
And not all these people were involved in Wolf 359. So
but I'm thinking the ending of Voyager was in the future of that.
No, that's how it. So Voyager,
because I mean they functionally handicapped the Borg at the end there,
right? And that's why you have the relic in season 1. But I mean, still, I again, it's a generational thing, I guess. Like you are dealing with the next generation in a sense. So these are people who didn't actively have to fight the Borg.
Right. I'm thinking like it's been a while for everybody since they've had to do anything with the Borg. Because we have the relic, but I'm thinking like as far as like the Borg en masse have not been out because we've how we left them.
They're in the Delta Quadrant too. So that's
right.
That
but
also...
she had done that virus.
Right.
So like they were. Like functionally, I don't see how they would have recovered well enough, to really to really be doing anything and like attacking and things like that, because like we see the relic, but that's kind of it.
And I mean, and it doesn't take them long, but I would have thought that like almost immediately you're hearing this multi-layer of voices, your mind should go, okay, this is probably Borg. But
it should be at least the possibility that the officer plays with. Yeah.
Right. Also, I didn't quite understand the resilience of the Bajoran officer when like he's like, oh, yes, you can go over there and check out it, and she walks over there and like the Bajoran is like, you're not touching my station, and I'm like, what's that about? Like that it just seemed really, really weird to be that kind of hesitant towards her. But yeah, we also, Picard does his little speech. We even get to see a very, very, very young Picard, a very different Picard as a young boy, and we get to meet Picard's mother, which I think is a very poignant story point. That especially when he talks to Elnor, and then also the graduating class of cadets or whatever the ceremony is. It was very, very kind of interesting because we haven't seen that side of Picard. Not that I don't think we'll get a whole lot of that. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But later on down with the rest of the season, and basically from there, like we're hitting the highlights of the episode for the most part. Everyone's doing well. Everyone's back in Starfleet. He's even back. He's been reinstated as Admiral, although he's kind of like Admiral in name only. Gets to kind of live his normal life, but show up for ceremonies. Rafi is a commander. We already talked about Rios as a captain. Girardi's
Rafi and Elnor are on the Excelsior.
Yes. Did you catch the Sulu, the Hikaru Sulu ship?
Yeah, I heard the name, but I didn't know where they were going.
Right, didn't know where they were going, but I caught the name. I was like, that's cool. I like that. And I also like the little joke of the Kobayashi Maru. I'm thinking of changing it up. I always hated that test.
One of the big things that I took away just from this episode was that I like season 1, how we have the Borg and we have the Romulans, and that's kind of our focus, and we're kind of just playing there and within that thing with Data and Soji and things like that. That this episode, like opening out to the season, like we're looking at Q and the Borg, and that's like Q and the Borg go together like hand in hand. Since he's the one who introduced us to this villain,
it's all his fault.
All those years ago. So I really like that we're doing another classic, The Next Generation, like sticking with the Borg, classic villain for them, and then bringing Q into the mix. So it's like I really, really like that.
So we'll go ahead and we'll kind of jump almost to there, because there's really outside of kind of those heavy moments we've talked about with you got the message, the Borg want to be a part of the Federation, which I agree with Picard, but I agree with Seven as well. Like I'm like, you're both right, but you're both wrong. Like, you should give them the chance because we don't know what's changed with them all of this time. But you also shouldn't give them the chance because they're the Borg. So it's like which one's right? Obviously, well, kind of from what we understand, Seven was right, because kind of a little plot point that we oversaw was that the Stargazer has some Borg technology in it. So when the emissary or whatever it is kind of comes on board, it's then hijacking the other fleet. I will have to say, I laughed out loud when they realize, it's when they want to send the emissary or something. Like once kind of the ship has kind of come through, they've confirmed 100% it's the Borg. It's cuts for Paramount for a commercial if you're paying for the if you're only doing ad pays for it, and I do ad free. But when it came back from the commercial break, you got all the ships warping in, and they're all standing there creating their battle line. I'm like, they learned their lesson, kind of. It didn't quite work out with them. But anyways, jumping kind of back up. Found it very interesting that she was only stunning everyone that was shooting at her rather than killing, because it means that there's more to what's going on. So it may not be as nefarious as it presents itself to be. But Picard initiates the self-destruct. Self-destruct happens. Picard wakes up.
With God.
And he's got kind of a different Starfleet badge. He's kind of trying to figure out what's going around. Everything doesn't quite look right. The chateau doesn't look right. And then we hear the voice, and I loved it when I hear the words "Mon Capitaine." And two people, because we talked about this.
Kicking my desk. Sorry,
you're fine.
Need to hit that.
To people, because I saw this in a comment section, who said they've already ruined Q because Q does not age. They had you people in mind for this, because as soon as Picard turns around to the sound of the voice, we see Q, and he's how he's always looked. Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, it looks like you've put a few miles on you. Let me catch up." And now he's old, which is, like we talked about before recording, you mentioned a very Q thing to do.
A very Q thing to do for his character. Very. And also, just because Q doesn't age doesn't mean he can't present himself like anything that he wants.
Right.
If he wants to look like a glass of water, if he wants to look like an ancient, whatever, he can look and present himself as absolutely anything. Established day one when we met the character, he can look like anything, so it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Like, why does it matter? And of course, like you said, immediately he's like, "Oh, let me just and he just immediately ages himself. I mean, why not? What else would he do?
Well, they even did it with Guinan too, because he even makes the point of saying to Guinan, "Hey, you guys don't age
the same
as quickly."
way, yeah.
And she's like, "Well, only if we choose to." And she goes, "And it was people were getting uncomfortable with me looking the same, so I aged myself up." They at least took that into consideration. Yeah, does it feel like a little, ham-fisted to have to write in an explanation? Q's is more like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. Guinan's, it's like, okay, you had to write it in there because Whoopi isn't Whoopi from the 80s,
Right.
We all age. We all either get fatter or get slimmer, it just...
Yeah, and you don't want to have to constantly be spending your budget on doing CGI makeup.
Right. And even with young Q, 2 seconds that they had to have him de-aged, and they're fine, and it was like, okay, we've got it fixed, we got it addressed. So, like I had said to you in messages, very good start. Very good start to the season. We've got Q showing up just at the very end, enough to, make you want to come back for that next episode to see John Delancey's performance. And definitely has me interested in where the season goes. Now, my concern is, because I've never been a huge fan of even these episodes of Star Trek in general, whether it be Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Next Generation, even the original series. I do not want to spend 90% of the season in the past. So I don't want to spend so much time in 2042, because that's...
Oh, when they're going to 20, okay.
Because as we get from the previews, right? The previews of what's to come this season. Q has changed history. Because, again, this is all part of the trial. I'm assuming, because, as he says...
Trial never ends.
Trial never ends. But, he's changed something, so the world isn't... It's not the Terran Empire, it's not the Mirror Universe, but it's very similar, it looks like, from just what we see from the previews for the season. And they have to go back to 2042 to fix what Q altered. Right. So I just don't I think it's going to be fun. I like kind of like them, like Rios is getting his picture taken at a police station and trying to figure out what this all is. And but I just don't want them to spend, I think we're getting, what did we have last season? 8-10 episodes?
And how many episodes are we getting?
I would assume it would be very similar. So we had 10 episodes last season, so I would assume 10 episodes this coming season.
It's set to premiere. Will run for 10 episodes.
Yeah. So I'm fine with a max of 3 to 4 at most being set in the past. I just do not want them to over rely on it.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like in the past we've had like maybe two-parters that were in the past, so that's probably not bad. I don't want to spend a ton of time in just trompsing around their mirror universe, whatever they're going to call it, just because I don't know. I'm like, I want to understand what's going on with this Borg thing that came over to the ship. Like,
we even got images of Alice Krieg's Borg Queen too.
Yeah,
so we know she's going to be back.
I'm more interested in what's going on there than I am what thing they have to fix in the past for Q, honestly. So I feel like it's going to be related somehow because Q usually does something like that.
Right.
Like that the two storylines will connect somehow. But I want to figure out what's going on there because my only concern for the season is, did you catch that line when we have the young boy Picard, and then in his speech where he says his mom always told me look up. So when he's right there by the Borg emissary thing, it looks at him and says look up. And I'm like, now was that something in his head or did the Borg thing say that to him? And are we going to be like, oh, it's his mom?
See, and I have a feeling it is going to be that.
I'm not sure if I want that.
Right, like I'm not saying I want it, but why hide the face? Because I was assuming it was actually the Borg Queen until that line. And I'm like, okay, how are we going to work an explanation around that and not force it? Because I think what...
Well, like, how do you have the explanation? How do you have a woman who supposedly never left the planet?
Right.
With the Borg somehow? Right. Like, I don't... There's a whole bunch there that I'm like, I'm not sure that I want it because there's a lot you've got to do to make it...
Well, and we still don't even know what the rift is.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not a Borg cube, so we have no idea. And kind of what you were talking about with like the two-parters, this is kind of how I see it going. I see next week's episode being a full mirror universe episode.
Where they figure out what they have to fix.
The next 2 to 3 are probably going to be in the past, and then the rest of the season is coming back and trying to finish the storyline with the Borg and with Q. So we'll see. But again, those are just fears of what we don't know yet is to come. It's just what we've seen from the short glimpses they provided in the trailer. But overall, I like the episode. I think it was a great start to the season. It even seems like on IMDb, people are actually enjoying it and actually liking it. So, I'm hoping people enjoy this season maybe a little bit more. Maybe they have more of a defined plan of what story they want to tell and not mix a lot of different plot lines like they did in season 1. Especially now that you have kind of the crew already assembled. We know who the crew are. We know their motivations. We know their characters. So they don't have to reestablish that for this season. But we'll see what comes, and we'll be covering it like we normally do. So to score the episode, I think I'm going to give it a solid 4.
Okay.
And you?
I was thinking like 3.5, just because not like outstanding. It's just a solid opener.
But it is kind of just it's nice to have Picard back. It's that kind of comfort food. Like Patrick Stewart's in it, I'm probably going to watch it. Although I will say, like, I would retire soon. Not like his acting's not bad, but you hear it in the voice, you hear the age, and it's one of those things like just enjoy the rest of the time you've got left. But I don't need like 7 seasons of Picard and worry every year. Oh no, is he going to pass away? Like I don't know. But since we also were talking about Star Trek, did you hear the news that they are actually going forward with Star Trek 4 with the original cast of like Zachary Quinto and Chris Pine?
No.
Yeah, they are in the works. I think pretty much everyone's back. The only person that they have to convince is Chris Pine. Only because I think it caught him off guard too, that they were like, oh yeah, we're just going to go ahead and do a fourth one. Like just completely out of the blue after all the other ones kind of failed, and then their original plan for 4 kind of just disappeared.
Tanked, yeah.
And Quentin Tarantino was going to make an R-rated Star Trek movie.
Well, and then they had Anton Yelchin pass away, and
yeah, that I don't know how they're going to work around that.
Well, I mean, obviously Chekhov is just going to be dead, so
that or they're going to get someone else. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I want that. I really kind of don't
I
want
would
that.
rather they just say that he died in
or,
the
or
battle
even
or
just
something.
say just say he's on some long mission. You know, just that's where he's at. He's serving on this other ship an indefinite period of time or some such. I don't know. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see how that goes because you know, I like those movies as much as, you know, we have an issue with Discovery. Star Trek with them, and JJ Star Trek rather, in that sense, never really did anything bad by Star Trek, in my opinion.
No, I think it was very smart to start out with establishing it's a second universe.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't have to like really fill all those expectations of like that was the mistake Discovery made.
Right.
They tried to say this is where it's set, and it does not
just
in any way fit. So they like from right off the bat establish, well, of course you get it officially confirmed for you, you know, when they're like, we've created an alternate timeline, blah, 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 explained to you by Spock at a later point in it. But we start the bat off with creating an alternate timeline.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. You know, and oh yeah, you know, and he likes a lens flare or whatever, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the look looks exactly like the 60s. Right. Like some of the things, the complaints about when people have updated sets and things like that, just kind of boggle my mind because I'm like, do you think in the 60s that if they had access to that, they wouldn't have used it?
Right.
Like that they wanted to have a thing of Christmas lights? Like they were trying to do, you know, and have this vision, but they couldn't bring it to fruition. That's like part of the reason why when we did our Dune review, it's like they finally have technology to make it not look ridiculous, you know?
You know, you bring up that point too. Remember how the Borg shield looked when they show up in Next Generation? It was very much like how it looked in Dune.
Yeah.
Now, this time, it looks like they actually have an actual shield that doesn't look blocky or blurry, you know?
Right.
It looks legitimate, much like Dune. So yeah, it's one of those things I think, and I will say what I did like that Discovery did in season 2, and it has actually nothing to even really do with Discovery because it's going to be another show with Anson Mount as Pike. When they bring the Enterprise in on Discovery, they actually, for the most part, and let's see if I can pull up a picture here. Let's see. They did a really good job with the bridge design for it. Let's do a Star Trek Discovery Enterprise bridge. Is that it? That doesn't look like it. I guess that is it. That doesn't seem right, though. No, this is it. This is more like it. I guess that is the same picture. But it doesn't look as good.
It's a better angle, yeah, the other one.
So, let me get over here for anyone watching. How do I zoom in? I'm a boomer. Just say that. Well, anyways, but like, I'm using
browser. Yeah,
I'm using Brave browser, so it's not as easy to.
Well, I think the other picture was a better angle.
So let me switch us back over here and pull
just
that back up
to be able to see the familiarity to the other one. That one, yeah.
Let's look at that one, and that one should
to the 60s one.
So like you have the bars, you have the red center console, you have the so like this looks
the red turbo doors
right.
in the back.
It looks
turbo lift doors.
It looks more like the original series but updated versus what you get in JJ Trek. But again, like as you talked about with the kind of alternate timelines, I'm fine with that, and I'm perfectly fine with this. This is one thing I will say Discovery got right, was this bridge. Not much else Discovery got right, except being smart and going, hey, we're just going to go ahead and jump 900 years into the future so we can't screw with canon anymore.
Right.
Oops. There we go. So, all right, that we have covered the Batman. We have covered Star Trek Picard Season 2 opener. So, if you do not want to hear spoilers for the last 20 minutes of the podcast on the Batman, tune out now. We appreciate you stopping by or listening to this on replay. Whether you're listening to audio only or watching us on YouTube replay, we appreciate it. Be sure to share this out with your friends if you like our takes and make us more well known. Don't forget we got Patreon. We'll be getting back to Daredevil Season 1 watch along. We still have to plan our Parks and Rec series as well. So more content to be coming there. So definitely go check it out and join. All right. So you've been warned. Leave now if you don't want the Batman spoilered for you. All right.
Eat a quick snack.
Yeah. Eat a quick snack or just tune out. That's your other option. Why don't you go ahead and lead it off? What did you want to talk about?
Of course, when I got half a cookie in my mouth.
I wasn't looking at the camera. Sorry. Okay, no, I'll go ahead and talk first while you finish.
Oh
that.
no, I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
Go ahead.
I was like, right as I'm trying to chew it up and swallow half a cookie.
So we call a sandbag.
Okay. So spoiler review for the Batman. I loved it. No.
It's not a spoiler. We already talked about that in the first hour.
No. When we were talking about how this movie shows you things and doesn't have to tell you things, like there are so many scenes just in the first like half hour that just completely show you the story. So he doesn't have to spend a ton of time, even though there are scenes with exposition. Mm-hmm. You don't have to spend a ton of time. So that scene when Gordon is walking him in to the crime scene where the mayor's been killed, and the reaction on all the police, their face, like tells you immediately that this isn't normal.
Right. Tells
you immediately that they don't just normally see him walking around and like, what's going on? They're like, should we arrest? Should we not? But Gordon's walking him in here. Like it's things like that just. Like, it does so much work. That's why I was like, people study this. This is when we want you to show and not tell.
Right.
Like, this is perfect. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other spoilery things that I really did like.
So let me ask you about this, since we're talking spoilers here, and I want to see what your thought was, because it's counter to what we're normally presented with when it comes to the Waynes. What did you think about them not being perfect?
I was okay with it because them being perfect is cartoony. Mm-hmm. That's a very cartoon thing, that your parents are perfect Boy Scouts, perfect Girl Scouts, never do anything wrong. And I don't really feel like that's reality. And for DC that likes to try and be reality and a little more gritty, like that's very cartoony and like Marvel-y, like to have your parents be perfect. So the fact to me that like I think the truth, one of those like the truth is somewhere in between two people's perspective of the story.
Yeah.
When we get what Falcone versus when we get what Alfred tells him, I feel like the truth is right in there, in that middle spot of like, I don't think Thomas had bad intentions. I think a situation got away from him.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I'm still slightly confused about why it was so desperate to hide what was going on with Martha's family.
So
like they explained a little bit, but they didn't.
So did you miss the whole part about like?
I mean, I saw her in asylums and stuff, and that she's in Arkham. But I'm like, none of that sounded like political suicide to me in that way.
That's what Alfred, I think, clarifies, is it wasn't about the politics. It was just that it was purely to protect Martha and to protect Bruce.
I guess just to protect her reputation.
Yeah, like he just didn't want her past problems to kind of be
brought out.
Yeah, brought out, paraded, because he is running for mayor, which is like, I've had family members, I've had people tell me, you should run for local office. And I'm like, I mean, I ain't bad, but I don't need people digging into my life, like, because that's what it's going to result into, is they're going to find something
they're going to grab onto. Something you said in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the world we live in right now, where everything is hyper sensationalized, and you don't, like you said, you don't even really know what's more the truth. It's more of what's somewhere in between versus what your opponents are saying versus what you're saying. So that was, and I like that they leave that kind of ambiguity there, because I'm still of the mind that Falcone did not murder, like, it probably crossed his mind to murder Thomas and Martha, and it wasn't Maroney, but that it was just a petty criminal, because that's what makes it more tragic, is even though these forces were out there, this random guy, Joe Chill, wanted money and pearls.
Needed cash, yeah.
And that's what took him away.
Yeah, I like that they left it ambiguous. I can't say the word ambiguous. I like that they didn't just spell it out for you, like, especially Alfred's scene there when he's talking to him and telling him, like, his side of the story of, like, if I wish I had that answer and I wish I knew, like, and because they don't have that answer, they don't know, because it makes sense. It makes sense for Maroney to have done it. It makes sense for Falcone to have tried to do it. Like, and nobody knows, and it could just be, Joe Schill.
Yeah.
On the street. Like, nobody really knows.
And go ahead, finish what you were going to say there.
Well, I was just like you said, like, that's really good, and it doesn't do, like, or take away from their story for me, and Thomas and Martha being not perfect, like, cherub angels, like, doesn't hurt the story in any way for me. It sounds like, I mean, I don't feel like they established for us how bad the city was before.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like it got really bad when he died and everybody could make a power grab for that renewal money. Right. Like, and it was like $1 billion, I think they said.
Something like that. It was ridiculous.
Yes, that $1 billion, not having a Lucius Fox to watch over it, really feels like that turned it and really tanked the city right there. So it's because I don't feel like they had any establishing, like, Gotham's been crap for 50 years or anything like that, like, for us in the movie.
Right. So this is where a lot of the like, when I'm talking about the different influences into what the story is, the Telltale Batman game, I believe is it called The Enemy Within? I think that's what it's called. But anyways, what that story did was reveal to Bruce that Thomas was kind of involved with the mob and with Falcone, and it was like one of the first times. And so, if there's someone who's more inside on the lore of Batman and the comics and stuff that know that it's been done more in the past, that was like the first time that someone tried to change the story a little bit and go, yeah, they weren't perfect. They were a little bit corrupt too, because that is what is something that's so earth-shattering for Bruce, because, he's a kid, and we all think as kids, our parents are perfect.
Our heroes.
Like, they're our heroes. They never do anything wrong. They always know what to do. They're doing the right things. And then, as we become adults, we realize
it's not true.
They're just grown-up versions of kids who are just trying to function out there, and just trying to get by. And you find yourself in a situation like that where, Thomas did something that no other doctor would have done for Falcone had Falcone shown up on anyone else's doorstep. So he went with good intentions to be like, hey, I just need this to be hushed, right?
Yeah.
And little innuendo there with hush, and I will explain here in a minute. And Falcone took it too far because Falcone wanted Thomas in his pocket. Like,
right.
It was him seizing that moment. So it was a good man, a good desperate man relying on a bad man who is looking for every advantage he can get and a terrible situation coming out of it.
Well, and exactly what Alfred said, that was his mistake.
Yeah.
That was the mistake of trusting that he was going to not play by the rules that you had set in your mind.
Right.
When you should have known, Falcone's not going to do that.
Right. So the hush thing I was referencing, so the reporter that Thomas knocked off, but didn't really knock off, it was all Falcone, is Edward Elliot. And the way that Hush comes up on the screen is more of a reference to Hush, the villain in the comic books. And so Pat and I were speculating that this Edward Elliot is the father of Dr. Thomas Elliot, I think is his name. Anyways, a character in the comics who seeks revenge on Bruce and Batman. So it's like setting up another potential character. We talked about Easter eggs and all that stuff. The other big spoiler to kind of really talk about is we kind of have the Joker.
Yeah, and I was not entirely certain that's who it was at first until the scene kind of continued and played out.
Yeah.
And we had the laugh. I mean, then I kind of felt like I'm not sure how I feel about it. Just because I'm obviously we've already had a Joker because we have the Joker gang from the beginning of the movie. So
I don't know if they're the Joker gang at the beginning.
Well,
I don't know.
I feel like you're supposed to kind of go with that assumption, especially given that we have the Joker in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. The one idea that I heard was to have it be old man Joker in the prison. And not do another, because it's one of those where I feel like this character has been done to death.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's so popular of a villain. It's been done to death in all the animated, it's been done to death in live action, and I'm just kind of ready for them to go a little deeper into the villain, to the I'm just trying to say villain and rogue gallery at the same time. I want them to go a little deeper into the rogue gallery and maybe pull from there instead of constantly just oh no, it's the Joker.
You and I disagree there, but that's me.
Well, I just kind of feel like we've seen it so much that it's kind of wouldn't you like to breathe a little bit before we have a big climactic Joker thing?
Nah. So I do have some clarification to add on there for you, because I was reading this article after I got home from the movie. So this is not necessarily full Joker yet. This is proto-Joker, and there was an additional scene that was filmed that he cut that he will release later on, where while Bruce is trying to profile the Riddler, he goes and visits him in Arkham to kind of a la Hannibal Lecter, get into the Riddler's mindset. So it was to establish that they had already had a run-in. So even if that is the Joker gang at the beginning, well, this is kind of why. Because Batman already kind of had the fight that leads to the disfiguring or whatever for Joker. He just isn't Joker quite yet. And so it's not even saying that Joker is, because he didn't say if that's who they plan on having for the second film. But what this really was, since this wasn't an origin story for Batman or for Bruce, it was an origin story for the Rogues Gallery. And that scene was purely to establish a connection. And that's the whole riddle with the friend, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really interesting moving forward. Because I think another thing that they talked about is the smile is going to be more of a genetic defect that he is born with, rather than something caused by ace chemicals, to kind of again keep it more in that realistic realm. Mm-hmm. But and I'm going to get his last name wrong, but it's played by Barry Keoghan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who you will know from Eternals as the Eternal who mind controls the village.
Okay.
So that's this. It's the same actor. Because it was kind of bothering me of like, I was trying to figure out who it was because you don't get a really good look at him.
Yeah,
you
you
don't.
You don't see him. I kind of felt like they did it on purpose, because maybe they hadn't settled on things yet.
Oh no!
Like to only show like this much of.
It was very, very much intentional because they were initially keeping his appearance, the actor's appearance, because they announced he was going to be in it, or it leaked that he was going to be in it, and people were speculating. So they created he was going to be Officer Sean Merkel or something, and they were going to make these. I think they made some fake scenes with him in GCPD uniform, so to throw people off of what Matt Reeves was doing, planning, so that it wouldn't leak out there. So. Again, hey, we told you, if you're listening to this now and you're really mad that we just spoiled something for you, we did tell you beforehand this was going to be a spoiler.
The spoiler part, yeah.
But yeah, I really liked kind of the central mystery revolving completely around Bruce, but not really be about Bruce.
Right.
And the wool over the eyes thing I was kind of referring to earlier in the confession scene. I was convinced he had him figured out as Bruce. And he was going to do kind of okay, well, I won't tell them that you're Bruce, but I'm going to let you know you're Bruce. But then you get the line of Dahlia, we got all of them but Bruce Wayne. And I was like, oh, that was such a good way to play that scene out, because you had me sold. You had me sold from the letter sent to the manor, the estate, or whatever, and it being also having the letter to Batman and Fireproof. The way you're like, Bruce.
Yeah,
Wayne.
and he keeps saying it. I'm not 100% convinced that some part of the Riddler doesn't know.
It's.
But I think he, in his broken mind, But I'm not convinced that he 100% doesn't know. I feel like he's like maybe 70%.
So I don't know why this popped in my head, but you kind of hit. I can see where you're coming from. It's like when they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover on the CW shows, and you have Lex going to all these different Earths to kill Superman, and every single Earth he's going to, Clark Kent is Superman, but like when he gets to the Smallville Earth and is talking to Tom Welling, Clark Kent, he's like, my Clark Kent can't be Superman. Like, that guy? No. And it's like, but you literally just killed like
every single one,
70 Clark Kents in a row.
Right.
And but you still can't reconcile that in your mind. Now, I was wondering if they were going to play something into, because one thing that they've done with the comics is introduced a brother that Bruce never knew he had, and this dealing with the orphanage. I wondered if they were going to try to say that he was his brother, because you get that picture in his apartment where he's looking down on Bruce.
Yeah.
And they're both about the same age.
Yeah, or close to it. I was kind of wondering if there was going to be some other weird connection.
Yeah.
Especially when they were going into the family stuff with Martha. I was like, is there an illegitimate kid somewhere?
Right.
And he's the illegitimate kid? Like, that's what I was kind of thinking about.
I think, though, if they're going to do that, because that is perfectly set up, he has mentioned he wants to do Court of Owls, or he would love to bring the Court of Owls into the movies. That's where that would be more prudent to bring the illegitimate brother into it, as that's a big plot line in the Court of Owls storyline. So, but it did seem like there was some other connection of like him. Obviously, he's jealous of Bruce Wayne. He's the orphan that
Yeah, and you're the orphan. Yeah, you're the orphan in the crappy, orphanage that's, like you said, like run over with kids and like rats and stuff. And he's the only orphan they care about because he's the rich white boy. Which, I'm sure he'd be the only orphan they cared about just because he's the rich boy,
right.
But yeah.
So now, my wonder is, how much of 0 Year are they going to do? Because they have Gotham. By the end of the film, Gotham is completely flooded. They're kind of, it's almost reminiscent of No Man's Land from the comic books, where they're kind of isolated. The criminal, the criminal element is kind of out of control. They're not getting much support from the government, and everyone's kind of fending for themselves. I wonder, how much are they going to lean into that, if at all, for a sequel? Because I think it could make an interesting sequel, but you're still going to push off Bruce as a character for that. So I'm really intrigued, because I would say the earliest you're going to get a sequel is 3 to 4 years. Potentially.
Yeah, you would think, like a longer time, not anytime soon.
Because I know he's not ready to jump into a sequel, Matt Reeves. He's got ideas. He's got it tumbling around in there, but as he's quoted of saying, I'm going to take a little nap first. But this movie is long. But it didn't really cause any issues for me. The runtime was, I didn't feel like I'd been sitting in there for almost 3 hours. I wasn't tired. I wasn't bored. I was intrigued the entire time. The cast put in 110% in the effort. The sound design was fantastic. The score was fantastic. I mean, let me ask you this: if you picked this up, and this, since we're in the spoiler section, I can talk about this too. When Falcone is shot and killed, and the light is blinking, did it sound to you, with the blink of the light, that it was in the tune of the theme?
I don't remember, honestly. Okay. I don't.
If you ever revisit it, pay attention, because it sounds to me like it, and it's not like, oh, the music is playing in the background to it, but the music is kind of starting to swell up, but it just, like, because it's like, it's just doing that dit, like, to the beat of that
of the music,
that theme that they wrote for him. But yeah, I mean, to come out of that and say, that's not Batman, this is the worst movie ever, or this is a woke movie, so therefore it's going to fail. I mean, I get it that reviews are purely subjective, but if you have that opinion, you can have the opinion of it's not a good movie. I can give you that. Maybe it's too long. Maybe
you didn't like it.
Yeah, maybe it spends too much time spinning its wheels, or too much time on exposition, whatever. Fine. But to say it's not a Batman movie, to say it's not the Batman character in of itself, or to even call it a woke movie, you are being disingenuous, and you are wrong. I mean, you are the cynic in the title of this podcast.
Critics.
You are not being critical and actually judging the movie based on the merits of the story, sound design, acting. Not one of them I saw in any of those reviews I read that were trashing it for being woke talked about anything about the acting. He barely even talked about the story.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, it's all about dismantling systems. There was nothing about dismantling systems.
Well, they're trying to dismantle the corrupt system,
right,
but
right,
like again, that's par for the course for Gotham and Batman story. Like, I feel like every Batman story ever is Gotham is corrupt.
Yeah.
And he's constantly fighting an uphill battle against the corruption.
That's even why Selina says, this city will take your life. Like, you're never going to fix it. And, I mean, it's just, and even in real world, you're going to tell me our politicians aren't corrupt? I couldn't tell you any politician that I believe that's in office that
hasn't done something,
is 100% clean. They have all done something, whether it's minor bad or major bad. They've all done something, because power corrupts.
Right.
And, but I don't really have anything else to say, and we're running a little bit over here. So
a little bit over. I don't know. I'm trying to run through a 3-hour movie in my head of, like, is there any other
after
scene?
One viewing too, you know.
Yeah, after one single viewing of it, I think we've covered it. Yeah, like, setting, it was filmed beautifully, it was edited beautifully, like, great camera angles, cinematography. I liked all the costuming. I did like his Batman suit. You know, like I didn't hate it. You know, I liked it. I liked her basically Catwoman outfit and the simplicity of it. Honestly, I liked that. I don't know, I'm still running through my head. I liked that Colin Farrell did such a great job, and they had such great makeup for him that I didn't even recognize and realize it was him at first.
Yeah, and until you see his name on the credits, or you know for a fact that he's playing Penguin, you're like, oh, I have no idea that's Penguin, or that's Colin Farrell.
I'll leave you with a little funny story of just I think is funny. Okay, so not looking at the cast list or anything before I went in to watch it. I'm watching it. And, you know, Jeffrey Wright is Gordon. Took me forever to remember because I was like, why do I know him and why do I know that I like him as an actor? Literally, it did not come to me, literally, until the scene at the end, at the very, very end, again, big spoilers, where Batman cuts himself off from that that hanging electric thing or whatever, and he, you know, takes off that's the knife, cuts it, and falls into the water. And my mind thought, that's still electric. Wouldn't something have shocked all the people by now? And then I thought, Beatty, because he plays the character, and that just was the connection for me.
Beatty and what?
Let me look it up real quick.
Because I'm trying
to make sure.
I'm trying to
make sure that I'm telling you the correct thing. But that made the connection in my head for me to go, yes, that's who that is. And it literally took me until that point in the movie. I was thinking about it the whole time. I wanted to get out my phone and look him up. Yeah, okay, in Hunger Games. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, yeah.
But because he's in Catching Fire, he's the one who has the plan to electrocute everyone on the beach in the wet sand. And when he fell, and I thought, wouldn't that still have shocked people because there's still electric in that thing? And that was what made the connection. And I went, oh, yeah, that's the guy who played Beatty.
I totally forgot he was in that.
It literally took me the whole freaking movie because I was sitting there, could not remember for the life of me, couldn't bring it up.
So you haven't watched Westworld at all?
Well, no, I haven't. Just as another, I don't know if we've talked about this because we haven't done like X-Men movies, but when I was watching First Class, it took me the entire movie to realize that was Kevin Bacon. It took me the entire movie because I was watching it knowing I know who this is. I know. And it took me the entire movie to realize it was Kevin Bacon. So
shame.
That's the thing going to see movies sometimes. I'm like, why do I know this actor? And I can't get out my phone and look it up because I'm in the theater and I'm being respectful of everybody around me.
Yeah, you could, but we call those people jerks, and someone was
teenagers.
Doing it. Not mine. Mine was some guy just pulling out his phone three times in the movie, and I'm like, I'm about ready to throw my keys at you, sir. Like,
but yeah, it took me freaking ever to remember, and I was like, oh, that's who that is.
I'm really interested to see what type of universe this creates, because I get we're gonna have our in continuity and out continuity movies, and movies like the Batman and Joker are kind of their own worlds, but I'm not gonna lie, a little bit of me hoped that like Flash was gonna just like pop in for 2 seconds and be like, all right, I'm out. Like, this isn't the right place I'm trying to get to, and get out of there. There is, it's more of an FU to the audience, but I think a good FU to the audience. It's probably more of an FU to Marvel audience. There is a bit of a post-credits thing.
Is there?
It's very minor, and if you miss it, you're not missing anything. It is the computer screen. So if you remember when he's typing like messages back to the Riddler when they figure out the URL, and it just goes goodbye. And that's it. Someone in our theater got really pissed, and they're like, screw you. And I was like, come on, dude. Like, it's cute, it's funny. Like, I didn't care. All right, well, I think that's gonna do it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our reviews. Got more coming, more stuff planned. Just trying to fit it all in our very, very busy schedules, as I know I have a very, very busy week this week, and I'm not looking forward to it. So, all right, guys, we will talk to you next time.